Welcome to the Unfiltered Healing Podcast. I'm Dr. Rachel Hamill. In the topics of peptides and peptide therapy, are peptides really safe? Should we have reservations about peptides, where we use them, and how we utilize them? Check out this clip from our latest podcast episode with Dr. Brian Trainer, and make sure you check out the show notes for the full link to the episode on Spotify and iTunes. There's now quite a bit of talk about peptides now, and mostly it's in the sphere of like GLP-1s and weight loss and all of those different types of things. But I also love that you're a man of God, and you qualify and quantify these things of the pros and cons about how we can utilize it to how we were designed. So, were there specifically when you started looking into peptides or were introduced to them, were there any specific reservations that you had? Because I know, even now they're talking about specific harms that some of them can have, like Ozempic and some of these other brand named ones. But did you have any specific reservations? Did you have like things that you were looking out for as you were researching and getting into them?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely. So I love like pushing the limits of human physiology and trying to understand it. So I definitely have been exposed to what a lot of young athletes these days are using are called SARMs, selective androgen reuptake modulators. And I'm answering this because most peptides up to this point got really lumped in with SARMs and even anabolic steroids and things that were on the black market, basically, that weren't available, or at least the gray market, we would say, where you can order something online. It says not for human consumption,
Yes.
made in a research lab only, and you pay with
Yes.
Bitcoin and send someone a Venmo that says pizza or something. And that was the only way to get some of these things. So I had tried different things at different points for different athletic goals. And thankfully now most of them are being tested for pretty rigorously in terms of World Anti-Doping Agency, drug-free sport that UFC uses. So I work with a lot of athletes, so it's just an interesting discussion. People sometimes lump the two together. The biggest
Mhm.
difference is, does the body produce it? Is kind of one question I ask. And if so, roughly how do we know much about it? And so what we understand with peptides, so I did have reservations. I did not have reservations with BPC 157. That was kind of my gateway peptide. And it is for a lot of people because there's
Mhm.
such a broad array of things that it could help with. Now, kind of like how people discuss like CBD, which I just like to compare it to that because I have patients that clearly do well with CBD, with non-psychoactive extracts of marijuana, of cannabis. But not many people do. But a few people, it seems really helpful. We think that the body actually does produce endocannabinoids. Like we have our own
Mhm.
endocannabinoid system. It's a really interesting discussion. Um, but as far as I know, it's not easy to like test your own endocannabinoids. I should probably learn more about it. It's not an area of expertise for me, but I do believe that, right? So the CBD companies, it's not really worth their time trying to figure out who would be best for it because it is fairly safe and it's not usually not a lot of negatives. So same with peptides, like our body already produces, there's about 7,000 or more that we know of that we've already like found in isolated different human juices and tissues and extracts. I've used about 40 or so, both personally and with patients and stuff. And
Mhm.
so we understand that of those 7,000, that they all probably have some effect that God designed them for, or some purpose. Whether they have a therapeutic effect in different delivery mechanisms, we don't know that much about. We know that. So for me, I definitely had reservations, but back then it was like I was pretty new to naturopathic medicine. It was an older someone had just graduated that was using it effectively, and I looked up the basics of it and saw that I knew I had an inflamed, like I actually had damage to my gut. So the way I always kind of show is like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, such a broad diagnosis of exclusion. It just means that, well, you probably don't have celiac, you don't have Crohn's, you don't have colitis, you don't have an obvious parasite or something. So we're going to call it IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So IBS versus inflammatory bowel disease, I actually had tissue level damage that could be detected, which in a lot of ways is easier to treat actually now in nature in my approach. With IBS, we usually have to get more towards the mental, emotional, the mechanical, with actual structural treatments and stuff. So I find that IBS can be often, we might say, less severe, but ulcerative colitis. So BPC actually seems to potentially heal the lining of the GI tract on contact, is part of what it does for known damage. We use this term intestinal permeability or leaky gut. Kind of, sometimes overuse it, I would say, in functional medicine, naturopathic space. But we do know that glyphosate, other chemicals certainly cause that, or can lead to even a small amount of leakiness, which can then affect everything else in the body. So BPC seems to be BPC 157, body protecting compound 157, is orally bioavailable. That's the unique thing. Up until about 10 years ago, there was really only the common bro science and everything was really that you had to inject these things, because most of the studies were done on animals in other countries, and they injected the animal because they couldn't convince them to usually ingest peptides. So the new push now is to really make peptides more available in orally bioavailable forms, test the oral bioavailability, meaning how much is actually crossing the gut barrier into the bloodstream, and is it actually affecting the tissue that we're hoping to. And in definitely in humility and reverence, I think peptides are having effects well beyond what we understand the mechanism to be. And I think it's because they're in line with, in many ways, when I say peptides, the ones that I'm so far incorporating seem to be in alignment with this idea that God designed our bodies to heal. If we are made in God's image, that we are potentially able to heal.